Let me start with my journey, because then you will understand why I do this. I was raised by a phenomenal Christian mom in a Bible-believing home, and by the time I was about 12 years old, I started asking a lot of questions. And the church and my family had the same answer over and over. You just got to have faith. And for me, that didn't work, because I was this, so-called budding intellect, and I really liked science. I really liked technology. I really liked the answers that science and technology, as I rolled into high school, were giving me. They gave me some meaning, I thought, about the world. They gave me explanations about how this all worked. A lot more so, I thought, than the church. So as soon as I didn't have to get in the car anymore and go to church or Bible camp, I didn't. And I started calling myself a hypocrite, and I went through the end of high school. By the end of high school, I started calling myself an agnostic. I went to Georgetown, Oxford, and Berkeley, where I studied business, philosophy, and law. And by the time I came out of the University of California, Berkeley, Boalt Hall School of Law, I was a practicing atheist. That was what I called myself. I was a materialist, naturalist, atheist. Remember from lunch, there you go. Actually, I loved being an atheist. I loved it so much that I was actually one of these atheists that trained myself in debate against Christians. So my hobby, both informally and formally, was to debate Christians, to poke holes in their worldview, and to make them question the faith that they say they have. That was my hobby. Now, I marched to that tune during the entirety of the 90s, and you know what? I was a good guy, or so I thought. I was from a broken home, so I was going to honor my marriage, because that just made sense. I was going to honor contracts, because that just made sense. If those of us who are somehow blessed with resources in life have a social obligation to give back to our communities, that just made sense. I didn't need a notion of God or a higher truth or an absolute notion of power to just tell me that just made sense. Okay? And that, a social contract view of the world, if you know that term, that just made sense to me. Now, I was running fast. I'm a corporate securities lawyer, and this is the 90s, and I toggled back and forth between Silicon Valley and Silicon Beach, as we called Irvine, Newport Beach there in Southern California. And this was the IPOs, this was mergers and acquisitions, and this was the heyday of technology, the dot-commers, right? And I was running fast. I loved this stuff. Making lots of money. I was representing rock stars. I was representing the rock stars of the day in technology. The gamers had just come out. It was the microbreweries and the bagel companies and the juice companies, and we were representing, it was the place to be. I actually had my own firm down on the beach in Laguna Beach, California, six lawyer firm right across the street from the beach. We surfed and we fished after work every night. This was the life. Late 1999, everything slapped me in the face. My mother was in a battle for her life with breast cancer. And it was November of 1999 where my mom called and she said, "Hey, will you go to this oncology appointment with me?" And I said, "Sure, why?" Her husband at the time was really ill. She said, I just need an extra set of ears. See, when you're going through chemo and radiation and such, when the doctors are throwing everything at you, you just need an extra set of ears, right, to pick it all up. So I go, "Sure, of course. Love mom. I'll take a half a day off work to go invest in her life." And so I am in this oncology office, and the doctor comes in, this oncologist comes in and sits down with mom and says, "All right, let's just get real. We're at that point where the trade-off between ongoing treatment and the ongoing quality of your remaining life, we need to talk about that. We've tried all the chemos, we've tried the radiation, and now you're at that point where the trade-off is you're going to either be loopy and drugged up and not enjoy the remaining years or months of your life, versus we could keep trying, but you're going to be medicated and such." You guys, it slapped me. This conversation, I was sitting as like one of those outside observers just watching this thing, and when your gut just drops to the floor. Because see, I was the cheerleader, right? I was the positivist. Yeehaw, mom, we're going to get through this. I have a very rationalist mentality, and I just crumbled. And it was just like that one fell swoop of, wow, there is life, there is death, there is origins and destinies, and there is meaning and purpose, and this is my real mom suffering real pain, and she really is going to die. All this stuff's going through. Big questions I hadn't thought about for over 20 years, you guys. Those are the questions that, maybe you deal with someday. You know what, quite honestly, I dealt with them. I did college philosophy. I was done. But man, I came out of that place that day knowing that there was more. I had to just to be intellectually honest with myself, I had to ask the big questions again. Now, I didn't crumble to my knees and come to Jesus. I went on a crazy journey. I truly went on a journey of exploration on these big questions. The first place I went was, where did I leave God? So I went back 20 years earlier to my high school biology, physics, etc., and I went, well, what's happened in the last 20 years? You know, that's a good place to start. See, whereas 20th century, the end of the 20th century, science and technology kind of removed the need for God. It was like, you know, we understand it all now. We've seen, you know, the miracle of gestation in utero with 3D imagery, right? We have Hubble telescopes now. We have electron scanning microscopes. We can see it all. We've explained it all. All that other stuff was for throwback, you know, ancient cultures that needed a reason, right? Guess what I found out? 21st century science and technology has brought God right back on the table like never before. You cannot deal with the causation of all of this, the order, the design, the fine-tuning, the complexity inherent in everything you see. You cannot deal with it without looking outside of a purely materialistic, naturalistic explanation. You can't. And I started delving into this microscopic world, these irreducibly complex machines at the microscopic level. I looked at DNA, you guys. I was representing, for 10 years, I was representing smart people that did everything with ones and zeros, binary code, right? Ones and zeros, that's what everything you see is working on now with computers. And you know what we are? We're just 4-digit code. DNA, 4-digit code inherent in us. Enough in you, Pastor, that if we were to write it out in books, we'd fill the Grand Canyon a few times over with the blueprints that are written with the digital code inherent in you. The code that tells an amino acid how to roll into the structure of a protein and how to become what becomes 30 trillion cells in each of our body. It's so profound, you guys, what DNA is. Francis Crick, one of the co-discoverers of the DNA molecule in 1954 with Watson, a materialist, naturalist, atheist, he couldn't reconcile what he discovered with what his worldview was. He couldn't, because information code doesn't pop out of the goo. It just can't. It never has, it never will, and he knew it. From 1954 until 1982, he tried to figure out an answer, and he delivered it to the mainstream scientific community in 1982, and it's called directed panspermia. That is, alien cultures loaded little spores with DNA and launched them on our primitive Earth billions of years ago to seed our ancient planet. Is that science or is that science fiction? Right?